get government approval, so people are starting everything as for-profits. And I don't know what that dynamic looks like in Russia.
In Russia, it's mostly they have a lot of NGOs, like environmental, humanitarian, like a lot, and a lot of companies, because as you said, it's part of the grid. But there is a gap between them. They're not interconnected. Like companies don't help NGOs, and NGOs don't ask help. So that's why.
So a couple of thoughts. One is that I believe that this concept, you all are the most socially conscious generation of the last couple. We're seeing it here at Pacific. I'm seeing it across university campuses in the US and Europe. I have to believe that that same dynamic exists among young students in Russia, that they're seeing the opportunity to change the world. The neat thing about this generation is you guys are teaching us so much about the way to use the internet, and social media, and tweeting, and Facebook, and Foursquare, and Groupon, and all this stuff, right? That you're impatient, you want to get things done now, you're inherent change makers, and I've got to believe that same dynamic exists among students in Russia. So I guess I'm wondering, is there an opportunity to start a program somewhere at one or more universities in Russia that starts to inspire students to do the research to see who's doing, because I guarantee you somebody is doing something in that country. It's probably still very much under the radar, and there's not much collaboration going on. So is there an opportunity to start a student program there? And then is there an opportunity ultimately to start a series of even small meetings or conferences where you can bring together the early adopters and even bring in folks from other countries who are doing great stuff so that they can actually, so that if I'm in Russia and I don't know about social entrepreneurship except just by name, that I can actually meet some social entrepreneurs. I'll tell you that organizations like Ashoka and Skoll and others, I'm sure would be interested in finding ways to get into Russia because it's a huge market, and it's a market that I think would really ultimately will be into social entrepreneurship. It just depends upon how long it takes. But I'd love to talk to you further about that. Because as I think about it, that's just a country that we've not done anything with. Mustafa.
With the respect that social entrepreneurship is getting, the recognition it's getting now, how do you see, or where do you see social entrepreneurship or social enterprise down the road in 20 or 40 years? By the time this generation of socially aware generation will become the old breed of socially aware breed, for the new socially aware breed.
So when you say that when you are like as old as me, it's a great question. So the question is really kind of long term, where do I see social enterprise 30 years from now? I actually think, so today there's a very small but growing number of consumers and a very growing number of employees who are interested in the social consciousness of a business from which they're either buying something or looking to go to work. And that's changing the way the companies are thinking about sustainability, the environment, social governance, etc. And I think that groundswell is only going to increase. So I'm going to guess, Mustafa, that 30 years from now, if you're interested in buying a product, you're going to take into account what that company does from a social and environmental perspective in buying the product, because there's going to be so many easy ways for you to do it. You'll be able to pick up your phone, you'll link something here, and it'll give you some type of score that'll tell you, and I think you'll be able to do that in the next 2 or 3 years. So 30 years from now, I think that companies that don't have a social or environmental mission included in their business model are going to be the outliers. And from an employment perspective, from a purchasing perspective, it's going to become much more normal for that to happen as opposed to the opposite.
What evolution will bring a bottom up in terms of normal human beings and their lives?
Well, I think that, so from I think a big humanity perspective, part of the reason why I think this generation is so socially conscious today is because we, and you particularly, are so much more interconnected with each other than we've ever been. So for me, when I was your age, I mean, my ability to have a conversation, I had no ability to have a conversation with somebody other than the range of my telephone, right? Which was very expensive to colleges out of state, much less out of the country. So the idea of Skyping with somebody in Rwanda or the Ivory Coast or Senegal was not even something I could ever conceive. And now you all have opportunities to both travel and to communicate with people. So I guess what I feel like is, as we move forward from the bottom up, we're going to recognize that the purchasing decisions that we make, the decisions we make in our life, what we buy, what we invest in, where we bank, where we shop, who we work for, all have implications to other people in the world. And those are going to be real implications because we'll be more and more in touch with what's happening in the developing world and in the developing parts of our own communities. And I think that will cause us to be more aware of those things. And by the fact that we're more aware of those things, the companies will be more aware, and I think it's going to be a virtuous circle. I want to make sure it's about 7 o'clock here, so I'll be around. One more question. That's good. Let me take it. Right here.
With the job market falling apart, it's and us graduating with our big loans, we are socially aware. We are passionate about everything, but some of us, our comrades, they kind of get discouraged, and go back to the traditional jobs. Any advice on how to bring them back into, because it's becoming a big challenge and everybody's abandoning these smaller social enterprises for bigger companies that don't follow that.
So it's a great question. It's a great kind of closing question. And so first of all, believe me, I totally get it. My daughter's a senior in college. She's graduating. I'm helping her put a resume together, trying to get her off the dole for crying out loud. So it's a tough job market. And it is a particularly tough job market if you limit your search only to a small subset of companies that are social enterprises. I wish it were different. It's funny, I spoke about 2 months ago at Harvard Business School. Brightest kids in the class. These young people getting MBAs at Harvard Business School had every opportunity in the world to find employment, certainly the top 10%. And they were lamenting the fact that what they really wanted to do was to work in the impact investing field. And do you have any jobs available? Can I find a job in the impact investing field? God, if I don't, I might have to go to like McKinsey or Goldman or somewhere. And what I said to them was, I wish that, in this case, the impact investing field had so many positions available, we could hire all the great, passionate, bright young people who wanted to work here. The industry just isn't that big yet, as is the social enterprise industry, not that big. So what I advised them to do was to take the job that made the most sense for them, but to not forget about the fact that they've taken this work in social entrepreneurship. And to there's all kinds of opportunities outside of your job to volunteer, to become involved in groups and organizations. Here in the Bay Area, there's this thing called The Hub in San Francisco and Berkeley, which is a social enterprise incubator, where for $20 a month you can join as an associate member, go to events 5 times a week, stay part of the community. Here's the one piece of advice I would give anybody going into the business world is the only time 20 years from now you're probably going to remember what your first job was out of college is if you're like being asked on some type of interview to list all of your jobs chronologically and you have to think back to what it was. So there's this, I think when you're coming out of college, it's just, oh my God, my first job, it's so incredibly important that I picked the right one. And the fact is, people are building portfolio careers. So my suggestion is find a job that makes sense, even if it might not be exactly in the social enterprise field. Do things around your job to keep infused in the field, because that'll give you an opportunity to stay connected with opportunities that might come up. But I got to tell you, there's an opportunity to be what I would call a social intrapreneur. And what I mean by that is there's opportunities to go to work for a company and then start to figure out if you can infuse social enterprise within that company. Is there a group of people you can become involved with in the company that are looking at more sustainable ways of doing things? Could you join a committee internally, et cetera? Because it's actually, companies are going to change from the outside in and from the inside out. So it's actually possible in a company that doesn't have any elements of a social enterprise today to perhaps be a change agent from the inside. Whether that works out to be a long-term opportunity or just the next stepping stone, you know, and the other advice I always give is the relative unimportance of starting with salary in your first job. I think the only thing you should be looking at for your first job is, what is it that I can learn? What skills can I get? And where might this put me in the evolution of things I want to do? And the idea that you would look between two jobs and pick the one that paid $200 a month more than the other one, in the long term, that's never going to make a difference. What's going to make a difference is doing something where you're learning something, you're gaining skills, and you're better positioned for that second job, third job, fourth job, etc. So, well, hey, thank you all for your time. I'll do